Good day. Today is the 9th day of the 5th month of the year 2024. Just a little public check-in. Finds the right person who wants to make a difference in the world. All right. So I was reading this article about a young lady who's from the West Coast, and she's come to the to attend school. And like many people who have come to this area, to go to DC from time to time, and I'd be that one who would give $1 or $2 or some change or whatever it is that they ask for sometimes, right? Until I found out that that's not going to help anything. That doesn't help anything. So I'll just tell you my background a little bit. I used to work with the homelessness. It's actually one of my specialties I studied in school, but the big focus too was on prevention. And so that there are many aspects. There are those who are chronically homeless. There are those who might be homeless because they don't have a lease or something in their name. So they're called some people who are effectively homeless. So they might have a roof over their head, but it's not in compliance with how they would be able to maximize their commercial status and standing in trade and commerce. So there are many different levels of homelessness, but this one, what the young lady, she, I guess, decided to make somewhat of a project of helping this young man who is homeless in DC. Now, also in the District of Columbia is, I think, one of the two places where housing is actually a right. So in New York, I'm not sure if it's like a particular borough, if it's all of the state, that housing is a right. So amongst the states in the United States, food, having monies for or funds for food through the EBT program, used to be known as food stamps, right? That is your right. No, so that's why people can make bring in a lot of money with, or what would be considered maybe even 6 figures. And if they have their own business, then they're writing off some of it. They could still get a small amount of EBT credits every month. So now, is it the case that there's some alphabet agency programs that mess around with the EBT cards where you don't always get your whatever you signed up for or whatever have you? Yes, that happens. Just because it is a right doesn't mean that your rights are always honored with that. But food is a right around in the states, the state of states. Housing is a right in the District of Columbia, and housing is a right in New York. So a lot of times there are a lot of monies that are put into helping the homeless in the District of Columbia. So I had the opportunity to work with the homeless on many occasions, sometimes as an outreach worker, right? So with outreach, you make sure that people have access to showers, make sure that if they want to go to a shelter, they can go to a shelter. Many people do not want to go to shelters for various reasons. Was it the violinist that Jamie Foxx was in? And it pretty much said why he didn't want to go to a shelter. He did not do well. It wasn't good for his mental health. He wasn't comfortable there, right? And even when you do house people, because he got housing, right? So even when you do help people get sustainable housing, it's not always comfortable for them to be there. There's a community sometimes that people come into, being outside, being where there's no carpet. If you are sitting down smoking and then you're used to putting your cigarette butts on the concrete, but now you're inside and now you don't have your concrete to put your cigarette butts out on. You want to consider these type of things, right? So there are many reasons why people don't get housing or have housing other than there's just a lack of housing. And there's definitely enough resources when it comes to funding for housing. So then it has to do with the people who are managing the resources. And that's a whole nother story. But I just want to say that we want to shed light on this matter of homelessness, because with the amount of finance that flows through commerce, that's not the reason why there's still people who are homeless. That is far from the reason. Now, once a young lady will find that I'm not trying to say that everyone who does not have housing has mental health challenges. That's not the case that everyone does, but there is a high disparity there when it comes to the amount, or a high proportion of the amount of people who are having trouble with processing their thoughts. That's the brain is responsible, and there's a lot of stigma around mental health, and I want to help alleviate that too. Mental health, it has to do with how well, part of it, right? How well you handle different situations, and there are different dysfunctions that can go on in the brain, in the body, that cause the mind to not be able to function well, where you're organized enough, where you're in the present moment enough to connect with the different programs. It's not easy for them. It's just not easy. Just because someone goes to a shelter every day doesn't mean you're automatically going to get housing, because they have a day centers where people can go and connect with a caseworker and or a social worker. But that doesn't mean that you're just going to get housing. You have to be organized. You have to be persistent. And as people who might not be in that program, we could start to ask that those agencies, the people who run those agencies, become responsible to publicize actually what the flow is, not just how much grant money they got, but actually all their sources of income, and hold them responsible for actually housing the people. I know that depending on how you go about it, it can appear to be a shortage, but there, I think, needs to be across the states more communication, more social enterprise outside of relying on government funding to help house the people. And there are folks who are skilled in this area that have an entrepreneurial spirit that might consider that, and looking at how some of the foundations are actually funding their programs. And then with your entrepreneurial spirit, right, putting something in place to house the people like that. That is your right to do that. You can use your skill set for that. Now, one of the barriers to people using their skill set in that way is that many people don't know that the restrictions that have been placed on them when they receive, quote unquote, license to provide service, they don't know that those restrictions are actually against their constitutional, well, they're against their God-given rights. And so they have God-given rights, and then the licensees have to have the knowledge, understanding, and wisdom on how to apply the law so that they can do entrepreneurial activities outside of the license. Because other than that, you're at risk of losing a license. And then many times, and especially in a city like the District of Columbia or New York, where the pay is pretty good for a social worker, right? You're at risk of losing your source of income, your livelihood. And if you don't know any other way, then you kind of get along, which is you work your day job, maybe a job and a half, but to participate in outside activities that don't necessarily require a license, it puts you then at risk of someone making a complaint about you and saying, oh, they had a license and I didn't know the number. They didn't present themselves as having a license, or whatever things. So the District of Columbia, the professionals there are pretty good about weeding out frivolous. These are some things that are points that you will unless you were in the industry. So I just want to speak to the young lady, and that was so kind of you. The best thing you can do is bring attention to the ineffective services that are rendered to homeless people, because the outreach services are good. Okay, so an outreach worker, that they don't have very much responsibility, so you can't blame them. All right, they check in, make sure the man or woman isn't robbing anybody, make sure that if there's that they have a place to wash their clothes, a place for shelter if they choose to have shelter. And many times they are connected with getting an ID. It's not easy to just get an ID in the district if you don't already have one. So many times those folks, for various reasons, they don't have birth certificates available. So when you go to the day shelters, they help people get the birth certificates again. So then the birth certificate, you can use that to get an identification. Okay, and then now the District of Columbia has a process where if people choose not to use the Social Security number, or if they never were issued a Social Security number, they can still have an ID. And another thing that they can do is also use general delivery. That is where people get post, and then they can use that address, get whether it be a cell phone or whatever have you, to general delivery. And the benefit of general delivery over work, a benefit would be that you get to choose your comings and goings, because I happen to know that some of the workers are not very clear on the boundaries that are there when it comes to if they receive the mail, they might open it even though it doesn't have their name on it, even though they might not have initiated whatever mailing to that. But there is a little bit of breakdown there, right? And so these are just some options that people have. And I know I'm speaking to more so high functioning people who might be just a month out of having a stable place or whatever have you like that. But when it comes to folks who want to give, know that many times the folks who are homeless, they usually have quite a bit of spending money. Like when I say spending money, like unaccounted for funds. Because let's say they received an EBT card payment of like $180 a month. Okay, so if they get 180 from a month for food, they might get cold food at the sushi bar or salads or something like that. Can't get hot food with the EBT card. And if you want hot food, then I guess that's why you ask someone for some money so you can get some hot food. But okay, that's monies that are not always used for food every month. But then on the flip side, 180 is not a lot of money depending on how you eat, right? So that could go either way. But another thing that happens is sometimes if they have a good case manager and they are at a shelter, if someone has been diagnosed with some type of disability, whether it be physical or mental or whatever have you, they may be receiving, or if they've worked enough time over the years, because a lot of times folks who are homeless, they have not always been homeless. They did have stable housing at one time and then it became unstable for whatever one reason or another, sometimes not any fault of theirs, to be honest. And so they might be getting a check of $800 a month, $700 a month. So you get a check for $800 and then you get EBT for 180. That's 980. But they still will sometimes ask you for $1. So I've had people, when they ask me for $1, I ask them, have you talked, do you know this outreach worker? Do you go to the do you go to the daytime clinic? How come you're not getting EBT? And some, they say, I am getting it, or I lost my card, I have to go get one again. But they're at the day centers, like I said, they'll support them in getting the identification. Usually it needs to be a notary involved in that sort of thing. So it's not just like go get an ID. And that's what the young lady talked about, how she gave him money for an ID and he didn't go get it, because it's not that easy. And many times their IDs are stolen. Who's stealing them? I can't say. But even birth certificates are stolen and they have a value. It's not good to have a birth certificate stolen. It's something that you want to be responsible for when you have it. Okay. And let's see. So her task, the task that she took on, it was really not a reasonable task as far as, I mean, I'm not criticizing her heart in it. I think that's very beautiful that she wanted to do that. But when she looks back on the time that she spent doing it, she need not feel as if it was done in vain, right? She brought something to the forefront that can be addressed, can be talked about, can be eradicated, this whole homeless construct. Okay. So that's one issue. It's not just easy. You don't just go get an ID. You don't have an ID. You don't just walk up and say, hi, I'm me, and I need a state ID now. No, it's more than that. You need, and then maybe you might need a utility bill. You need an address. So an address or a post location. So these are different steps that one has to take in order to get that type of ID. And even let's say one wanted to get a passport, they still would have some type of stability involved with that. And that is way more expensive. And then the folks who are out there, they don't know how to access what is theirs to access. And that's a whole nother story. Okay. I would love to talk about that and share about that. But just know the shortage of funds, there is no shortage of funds. That's not the issue. Another thing, I'm glad that she was safe, because this is just a woman interacting with any man, right? You don't know this man or woman. You don't know. All right. It's not a healthy thing to have someone you don't know. When I say you don't know them, like you don't know what they would do in various situations. You don't know anything about their history. You don't have any mutual friends in common. The police are the policy enforcers, right? They can't save you from any type of thing. Sometimes when you interact with people, they're very kind at first, but if you have put yourself out there to be able to do something for them, they might come to expect something of you that you cannot do. And then you don't know how they will react. That's just a variable you want to be aware of as a woman in a city. I mean, it's just not a good idea. And sometimes it would be better if you even had a man to go along with you when you met people, because you just can't plan. And sometimes people might not know themselves how they would act in a given situation. So And when people, from an outreach perspective, from a case management perspective, from a social worker perspective, which is not the same. A case manager is not a social worker. It's not interchangeable. Okay, case managers don't have the skill set and the training that a social worker would have. So I'm not trying to say that you don't find good case managers, but it's just a more generic term. You can have different types of professionals be case managers, and they can be certified in case management. They could be a nurse. They could be, in some cases, you might have a business person who now wants to be a case manager. You're not going to get the same type of understanding and analysis of a situation from someone who is a business major and now wants to be a case manager. They can be effective if they're trained right, but they're not going to have the same depth and breadth of skill set to help you. So this is an important thing to know. All right. You don't want to be given cash. You don't want to be given, it's just not necessary. And people who sent the money, that's fine and all, but it would be better use of your energy to ask for the bookkeeping and all the sources of income that are made available to be known. Yeah. And yes, I do know some things I'm not sharing. And if I told you, you would believe me anyway. So if you ask the question, you ask and ye shall find. Okay. And keep your head up, young lady who did that good work, and that energy that you put out there will come back. Don't allow yourself to be distracted by other people's heartaches. Just allow yourself to be used where you are, and encourage them to go, when you see people in that situation, encourage them to go get resources. Because I don't know this young man. Well, his name does look familiar. However, that's not the point. My point is this: like, I don't have a personal relationship. I don't think I know him. But sometimes when people receive the money, if they were connected with the agency, they do have boutique agencies that work with people who are working with using substances and still need housing, right? But their monies are siphoned to them. They do a budget, and they'll help them budget various things. And so when you're giving funds to someone on the street, you might be unintentionally enabling them. You might be unintentionally enabling them. And that's not what you want to do when someone is in a city where housing is a right, and they don't have housing. And like I said, there are many reasons, and all of them might not be on that person, but to just to give, like, that. So I will go now. The last couple of days, and maybe for a couple more days, my reception is not that great. Thanks for letting me chat with you. Okay. And I'm still on my path to redemption, learning a little bit more every day. Trust law. Everybody, we need to learn trust law. Let's do this. All right. Peace.